board will now come to order. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Flowers. Alderman Bosley. Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderwoman Ingracia. Alderwoman Young. Alderman Conway. Alderman Ortman. Alderman Vollmer. Alderman Villa. Alderman Arnowitz. Alderman Wessels. Alderwoman Howard. Alderwoman Florida. Alderwoman Behringer. Alderman Rhodey. Alderman Kennedy. Alderwoman Davis. Alderman Schmid. Alderman French. Alderman Boyd. Alderman Vaccaro. Alderman Ogilvie. Alderman Cone. Alderman Williamson. Alderman Carter. Alderwoman Cruzen. President Reed. Alderwoman Young. Alderman Vollmer. Alderman Arnowitz. Alderwoman Florida. Alderman Rhodey. Alderman Cone. Present. Alderman Williamson. 24 present.
Quorum being present, I'll ask everyone in the chambers and the galleries who's able to stand to please rise for prayer. Giving all honor to God, Almighty God, source of all authority, we humbly ask guidance in our deliberations and wisdom in our conclusions. Amen. Dispense with our regular order of business, take up our courtesy resolution calendar, move for adoption of our courtesy resolution calendar, and entertain a second on that motion. Seconded by the Alderman from the 25th, Alderwoman from the 19th. Would you like to approach the dais?
Is there a representative here from the fire department? I didn't see the chief. Okay. Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board, and guests. I have the honor today to share something with you through resolution and recognition. Our St. Louis City Fire Department has been a part of a process with a corporation who has come to St. Louis to provide some additional training and understanding of new equipment that can be used to improve the safety of not only the firefighters who are doing their jobs, but also for construction processes and how we handle some of our what we consider to be our private underlying trenching technology. SAK Construction, we have two representatives here today, Gerald Addington and Mr. Jack Boatman. They have been here for several weeks working on a project with the fire department, and they have provided 40 hours of course training for our St. Louis finest, and they have provided with them not only the understanding of the new technology, but also giving them new techniques for rescue. That's critical. But when we look at the future for the city of St. Louis and how we move about in the future and taking care of our infrastructure, it's going to be important that possibly we will have some new technologies that will be used here in the city of St. Louis. So as I was aware of this, and as I always support my first responders, I wanted to make sure that they were recognized. So I thank them for what they have done. We have asked that SAK Construction, who is one of the fastest growing privately held pipeline rehabilitation and tunneling contractors in the USA, continue to provide these kinds of services throughout the country, and most especially stay in partnership with our city and make sure that we have all the, what I consider to be the leading technology available to us. I was also looking for our fire chief, who was very instrumental in even having the knowledge and the understanding of knowing that this is needed, and made sure that people were available for the training for 40 hours, which is a lot of time and rescheduling of folks, but they made it happen. So I also have a resolution that I will send over to the fire department, to the chief, and thank them for being forward thinkers. But Mr. Boatman and Mr. Addington, I would like to present this resolution to you and thank you for what you have done on behalf of the city of St. Louis and the St. Louis firefighters.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Would you like to have a few words to say? Go ahead.
Thank you. I'll be very brief. First of all, I grew up in the St. Louis area. I'm the former vice president of a local firm, and we decided that we would form our own corporation, so we set out non-compete. We're up and running. We're about 5 years old, and you can Google us, SAK Construction LLC, and we are one of the fastest growing construction firms in the U.S. today, and that's been quoted in the St. Louis Journal as well. On behalf of all of our teammates at SAK, I would like to say thank you very much, and it was a pleasure working with the first responders. We trained about 90 firefighters. We hope to never have to call them or use that 911, but should we have to call, we wanted to make sure that they understood what we were doing and where we are. The tunnel project will actually start at the Lee May Ferry treatment plant and end up at Virginia Street. Again, thank you very much for this honor, and the teammates at SAK will certainly be very proud to receive it. Again, thank you.
Any further comments? Any further comments? Any further comments? I also want to thank and congratulate SAK Construction for all that they've done to make St. Louis safer and to train up our firefighters. Let's give them one more round of applause.
The chief is not here, and I don't want to give it to anybody else. Yeah, I'll just send it over there.
Alderwoman Howard, Alderwoman from the 14th, like to approach the dais.
Well, they said the resolution was here. I have this version. So, should I bring them up here?
Yes, yes.
I would like to call Michael and Sandra Pfefferkorn up to the dais. Today, I would like to recognize Michael and Sandra Pfefferkorn, who celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary on June 15th. Sandra is a longtime former colleague of mine. We taught together for several years. And also, Michael is a colleague. However, we never worked in the same, at the same location. Whereas Sandra is a lifelong resident of the city of St. Louis and a graduate of St. Louis Public Schools, she attended Merrimack Elementary School and graduated from Cleveland High School. Michael has lived in St. Louis for over 50 years. Whereas Michael and Sandra served a combined total of 83 years as educators in the St. Louis Public School system. Sandra taught English and Spanish at Cleveland Junior Naval Academy and at Central High School. She taught the first advanced placement English class at Cleveland NJROTC, Michael taught history and social studies at Gateway, Southwest, and Cleveland High Schools. He also co-wrote the course study for Ethics in Science and Technology, which was taught exclusively at Gateway Institute of Technology. He received the honor of Secondary School Teacher of the Year in 1999. Sandra is a former president of Beta Theta chapter of the Delta Gamma Educational Society. She is an avid reader and volunteers as a reading tutor. Michael is a past president of the Missouri Numismatic Society, and that's a coin collector for those of you that may not know that, and the World Coin Club of Missouri. He's co-founder of the Ancient Coin Study Group, was founder and editor of the Missouri Journal of Numismatics. He also is a co-author with Chits, Chiselers, and Funny Money, which is a history of sales tax tokens in the United States. Michael and Sandra are the proud parents of Michael Jr. and Patricia. They have 4 grandchildren, Sarah, who is with us today, Colin, Molly, and Allison. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Board of Aldermen of the City of St. Louis that we pause in our deliberation to recognize the 50th wedding anniversary of Michael and Sandra Pfefferkorn and wish them continued happiness, and further direct the clerk of this board to spread a copy of this resolution across the minutes of these proceedings and to prepare a commemorative copy, which I have here, to the end that it may be presented to them. Thank you and congratulations, and we wish you 50 more.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Would you like to say anything?
Huh?
Would you like to say anything?
You want to say something?
Yeah, I will. Okay. There is perhaps one word I think both my wife and I would stand behind very much. We have had great faith in the St. Louis public school system for over 40 years. We believe in it. We believe in the teachers. We believe that what makes good schools is good people, that students, staff, and of course, administrators, etc. Sometimes they're a pain. But we do believe that education in the city of St. Louis is sound, is good, and needs to be supported by you. Thank you.
Any further comments? Alderman from the 11th?
Thank you, Mr. President. Just to add my congratulations to the Pfefferkorns on their 50 golden years of wedding, their wedding anniversary. Sandra taught English at Central High School, and I was a guidance counselor there. And let me just say that she was certainly no-nonsense teacher, and on occasion she would send children to my office, at which point I absolutely performed no miracles with them and sent them right back to Ms. Pfefferkorn's English class. So you have to be a certain breed of cat, and we thank you for you know, instructing young minds, and you were a real credit to our public school system and your good neighbors, and again, congratulations. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right, thank you. Alderman from the 20th?
Mr. President, members of the board, I too want to add my congratulations to both of you on your wedding anniversary. You know, we are so fortunate in the city of St. Louis, and I feel so lucky. I did have Mr. Pfefferkorn at Cleveland High School, and even though the school is closed, it is not forgotten. And my children today are, although they will not have the opportunity to have him as a teacher, we have many other teachers who devote their lives to our children in St. Louis, and they are enjoying the fruits of their labors because they've taught many people who went through that system, and those people are in turn teaching our children today. I wish I could remember a funny story. I do remember good things about your teaching at Cleveland High School. There are teachers from time to time who do not rise to the standards that Mr. Pfefferkorn set, but there are many others, as he has indicated, for whom we owe a great deal of gratitude, and I'm expressing that today. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Oh, where did he?
May I make one comment?
Yes, yes.
Okay. We humbly thank you for the honor, seriously. Thank you very much.
Alderman from 13th, would you like to approach the dais? These are your constituents.
Would you like to say a word? Alderman Wessels is their home alderman, and I happen to be a fortunate colleague of them and know them. And if you'd like to say a few words?
I'd just like to add that these two folks are just representative of some wonderful teaching professionals. They did it a long time, served a lot of children, and made parents' lives a lot easier. Thank you.
The Pfefferkorns just want to, for the many kids and the many parents that could not be here today, to thank you personally, and other members of the board that did not get an opportunity. Actually, all the ones from the first.
Mr. President, members of the board, I'd like to ask if we could pass this resolution in bank. I am married to a child of an educator's. Mother's a math teacher, father was a principal, started the magnet school program. But the thing that I really admire is those 50 years of marriage. I'm halfway there. I know how hard it is to get there. I appreciate it. You're a role model for me and other people who aspire and take those vows and say, to death do you part. Know how hard it is sometimes for it not to be death, okay? And just appreciate that you're setting a role model for people to know that when you make a commitment to be married, that it's a very important commitment, and 50 years is just wonderful. And I just want to extend my congratulations, and I want to grow up to be a big kid like both of you all.
There you go. Let's go. So, again, for the many kids and many families that could not be here today, to thank you personally, and for other members of our city and members of the board, I want to indeed thank you. For me as a father of four, as a resident of the city, I know that the city has been enriched because of you, because of the works that you've done within our city and with the kids that have allowed them to go on to achieve some great things. This resolution, although it's but a piece of paper, it is indeed the highest honor that this board has to give anyone, and it's an official act of the board. So what it does is that it cements in time. There you go. Yeah, it cements in time some of your many contributions to the city up until this point. So 100, 200 years from now, when they research the records of the city of St. Louis, they will find your names amongst those records and know that you've passed this way and you contributed so much so that today we pause in our deliberations to recognize you on your 50th wedding anniversary. So I'll ask everyone, can everybody stand and let's give them a real round of applause and thank you for all the works that they've done. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The Alderman from the first asked that we make this resolution in bank. I'll entertain a second on that motion. Seconded by the Alderman from the 23rd. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Madam Clerk, please prepare another version of that resolution in bank and let the record show.
So noted.
It's been moved and seconded that we adopt our courtesy resolution calendar. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Alderman from the 3rd.
Mr. President, members of the board, I'd like to have as my special guests some very special people that are here today. And they are going to be hosting a hill-a-thon over there at Fairgrounds Park, completely where the pool is. And it's going to be really good. Anybody think they have a health problem or would like to be checked out are welcome to come over there. And I'd like to welcome Christina Jackson, Natasha Winfield, and R.J. Jones as my special guests today for that particular health scene that's going to be in 3rd Ward, Fairgrounds Park, at the pool. Thank you.
Welcome. Welcome. Alderman from the 6th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I'd first like to recognize today Todd Williams from Construction Career Center. It's a Charter High School in the 6th Ward. He's a new principal this year, and I'm looking forward to working with him. I'd also like to recognize James Marisman. He is sitting with me today. He's the Parents as Teachers public policy intern this summer and is coming to find out about the inner workings of the board today. Thank you.
Excellent. Welcome. Alderman from the 23rd.
Yes, Mr. President, members of the board, I'd like to have as my special guest Al from Firefighters Local 73. This time I got it right. Percy Green III from Fire. Celeste Reeder from the Realtors. Bruce from the Painters. Harry Kennedy from the 14th Ward, and that's it.
All right, thank you. Alderman from the 4th.
Thank you, Mr. President and members of the board. As usual, I'd like to have as my special guest the Ameren UE family, AT&T, and Miss April Ford Griffin. My special guest is Charles Bryce.
Alderwoman from the 14th.
I'd like to have as my special guest Senator Harry Kennedy, committeeman of the 14th Ward, and Sarah Hutchison, who stepped away, is the granddaughter of Michael and Sandra Pfefferkorn and a former student of mine. Thank you.
Alderman from the 11th.
Thank you, Mr. President, for the second time this morning. As my special guest to my immediate right, Stacy Klossman and her daughter Nicole. They're residents of the 11th Ward. Stacy certainly attempts to keep me on my toes. She's very active in a number of groups with the visually impaired, and I'm happy that they came down to see us this morning.
All right, excellent. Welcome. Alderwoman from the 19th.
Thank you, Mr. President and members of the board. I'd like to have as my special guest today Jamala Wallace. She is a student in political science from St. Louis University, and she's also a friend of the family I remember when she was born. So I'm very proud of her and what she's doing, and she thinks she wants to go in politics, but that's why I'm showing her the ropes today so she can change her mind. But I would love to see her in public policy somewhere. She's a very smart young woman, and I'd like to have you as my honored guest today. Thank you.
Any further introductions? Alderman from the 22nd.
Good morning, Mr. President, members of the board. I have two distinguished guests this morning, Mr. Leroy Grant with Grant Communications and Chris Pickle with AT&T.
Alderman from the 9th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I'd like to have for my honored guest today, Ronnie Auer, who's staying in the cool leisure room. Thank you.
Right. Any further introductions? Any further introductions? Alderman from the 10th, I'd like to wrap us up. I forgot that last week.
Thank you. Apparently, Mr. Conway was using this microphone earlier. Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I know they introduced Mr. Grant, Leroy Grant, but I noticed that he has, besides AT&T, picked up the suspender lobbyist job in lieu of Marlene Davis's bill coming out today. Leroy. Today is June 21st, the beginning of the summer solstice. When we have that thought in our minds, it finally comes true during these meetings when you think, is this the longest day ever? Yes, it is. Thank you.
Alderman from the 13th, you recognize on the motion approval of the minutes.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to approve the minutes of the June 7th meeting.
Moved by the Alderman from the 13th, seconded by the Alderman from the 11th. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. Report of city officials.
Report of city officials can be found in sections A, B, and C of the agenda and have been placed in all aldermen's mailboxes. I have from His Honor the Mayor the following correspondence. Dear members of the board, pursuant to City Ordinance 65132, I have the pleasure to submit the following individual for appointment as Executive Director of the Affordable Housing Commission. Effective July the 1st, 2013, the appointment of Ms. April Griffin, who resides at 1209 Hogan Street. I respectfully request your approval of this appointment. Sincerely, Francis G. Slay, Mayor, City of St. Louis.
Alderman from the 13th, you recognize on the mayor's appointment for the Executive Director of the Affordable Housing Commission.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to approve the mayor's appointment of April Ford Griffin as Executive Director of the Affordable Housing Commission.
Moved by the Alderman from the 13th, seconded by the Alderman from the 20th. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, motion carries.
That's the extent of report of city officials.
Congratulations, former Alderwoman from the 5th. That was one of the better appointments that was ever made right there. We dispense with line item 7. Would anyone like to take any bills from any of our informal calendars? Would anyone like, Alderman from the 17th?
Yes, Mr. President. I move that the Board Bill number 63 go on the third reading consent calendar.
All right. Madam Clerk, please make note of that change. Place Board Bill number 63 on third reading consent.
So noted.
Would anyone like to remove any further bills or resolutions from any of our informal calendars? We dispense with line items 8, 10, first reading of board bills.
Board Bill 117, sponsored by Alderwoman Davis, an ordinance pertaining to the wearing of pants below the waist in public, repealing ordinance 60546 and enacting in lieu thereof a new provision pertaining to the wearing of pants below the waist in public and containing an emergency clause. Board Bill 118, sponsored by Alderwoman Florida, an ordinance pertaining to the employees' retirement system of the city, authorizing and directing the Board of Trustees of the retirement system to seek a qualified status determination letter from the Internal Revenue Service and to adopt regulations relating thereto containing a severability clause and containing an emergency clause. Board Bill 119, sponsored by Alderwoman Davis, an ordinance amending ordinance 65857 pertaining to the redevelopment agreement between the city and Grand Center, amending same to authorize an application for abatement for 3207 Washington project containing a severability clause. Board Bill 120, sponsored by Alderman Rhodey, an ordinance recommended by the Board of Public Service establishing a multi-phase public works and improvement project for the design, construction of various roadway infrastructure and safety improvements designated herein as the Vanderventer Transportation Corridor Project and containing a public work emergency clause. That's the extent of our first readings.
Reference to committee.
To the Public Safety Committee, Board Bill 117. To the Housing Committee, Board Bill 119. To the Public Employees Committee, Board Bill 118. And to the Transportation and Commerce Committee, Board Bill 120. That's the extent of reference to committees.
Second reading.
Following board bills were reported out of the Ways and Means Committee. Board Bill 71, sponsored by Alderman Kennedy, an ordinance recommended by the Board of Investment and Apportionment, authorizing and directing the issuance and sale of one or more series of water revenue bonds, Series 2013, in an aggregate principal amount not to exceed $10 million in order to pay and reimburse the city for costs associated with the extension, improvement, purchase, acquisition, construction, and enlargement of the city's waterworks system. Board Bill 91, sponsored by President Reed and Alderman Kennedy, an ordinance recommended by the Board of Investment and Apportionment, authorizing supplemental appropriation, amending ordinance 69154, commonly referred to as the City Annual Operating Plan for fiscal year 2012 through 2013, appropriating and setting apart projected excess general fund revenues to address certain expenditures in the general fund for the current fiscal year in the amount of $2 million and containing an emergency clause. Board Bill 112, sponsored by Alderwoman Young and Alderman Bosley, an ordinance stating the intention of the city acting through the treasurer, superintendent of parking meters, to issue one or more series bonds in an aggregate principal amount not to exceed $2 million in order to pay and reimburse the city's parking system for costs associated with the acquisition of Couple 7 building situated at 1014 Spruce Street and the subsequent demolition of such building and landscaping and improvement of the site and containing an emergency clause. The following board bills were reported out of the Streets Committee. Board Bill 105, sponsored by Alderman Cone, an ordinance establishing a stop sign for all eastbound and westbound traffic traveling on Merrimack at South 38th Street and containing an emergency clause. Board Bill 106, sponsored by Alderman Kennedy, an ordinance establishing a stop site for all northbound and southbound traffic traveling on North Boyle at McPherson and containing an emergency clause. Board Bill 107, sponsored by Alderman Rhodey, an ordinance establishing a stop site for all eastbound and westbound traffic traveling on South Boyle at Dugan and containing an emergency clause. Board Bill 116, sponsored by Alderwoman Tyus, an ordinance to repeal Ordinance 69284, providing for the unconditional vacation and abolition of a public right-of-way in the east-west alley in City Block 4380 East, that's bounded by Penrose Park, Euclid, Penrose, and Auburn. That's the extent of our second readings.
We dispense with line item 14, perfection consent calendar.
Board Bill 77, sponsored by Alderman Vaccaro, an ordinance pertaining to recorder of deeds fees payable by credit card or debit card. Board Bill
Madam Clerk, please continue to read the
Board Bill 89, sponsored by President Reed and Alderwoman Behringer, an ordinance of reaffirming the provision of ordinances 62391, 6669, 1676, 68409, and 68934, establishing a policy for the disclosure of potential conflicts of interest and substantial interests of certain municipal officials and containing an emergency clause. Board Bill 84, sponsored by Alderman Conway, and ordinance recommended by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, authorizing and directing the Director of Airports and the Comptroller to enter into and execute a First Amendment to the lease agreement to the Lambert Airport Lease Agreement AL-226 between the city and Jet Links, containing a severability clause and an emergency clause. Board Bill 85, sponsored by Alderman Conway, and ordinance recommended and approved by the Airport Commission and the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, authorizing and directing the mayor and the comptroller to accept and execute a certain financial assistance agreement offered by the St. Louis Jefferson Solid Waste Management District for the project entitled Airport Food Waste Recycling Project Expansion for a maximum obligation of $25,000, containing an emergency clause. Board Bill 2, committee substitute, sponsored by Alderwoman Young, and ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 901 through 23 Locust, 416 North 9th Street and 421 North 8th Street, and containing a severability clause. Board Bill 65, sponsored by Alderman Vollmer, and ordinance recommended by the Planning Commission to change the zoning of property from a single-family dwelling to the F neighborhood commercial in City Block 4076 for 5220 and 5222 Shaw in City Block 4076 and containing an emergency clause. Board Bill 95, sponsored by Alderman Rhodey, an ordinance affirming adoption of a redevelopment plan, redevelopment area, redevelopment project, authorizing the execution of a redevelopment agreement between the city and City Walk on Euclid for the redevelopment of 100 North Euclid and containing a severability clause. Board Bill 96, sponsored by Alderman Rhodey, an ordinance designating a portion of the city as a redevelopment area known as 100 North Euclid Redevelopment Area pursuant to the Real Property Tax Increment Allocation Redevelopment Act, establishing the 100 North Euclid Special Allocation Fund and containing a severability clause. Board Bill 97, sponsored by Alderman Rhodey, and ordinance recommended by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, authorizing and directing the issuance and delivery of not to exceed $10 million plus issuance cost principal amount of tax increment revenue notes for 100 North Euclid redevelopment project and containing a severability clause. Board Bill 98, sponsored by Alderman Bosley, and ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 2803 Hadley and containing a severability clause. Board Bill 104, sponsored by Alderman Kennedy, and ordinance amending ordinance 64728 by modifying the terms of real estate tax abatement in the Washington, Vanderbilt, Enright, Pendleton redevelopment area. Board Bill 1, committee substitute, sponsored by President Reed and Alderman Kennedy, the budget for fiscal year 2013-2014, containing an emergency clause. Board Bill 66, sponsored by Alderwoman Tyus, an ordinance to repeal ordinance 69092 pertaining to commercial semi-trailer trucks, also known as semis or tractor-trailer trucks, prohibiting such traffic during certain hours on Union Boulevard from the north boundary of Interstate Highway 70 to the south boundary of West Florissant, exempting from said prohibition emergency vehicles, including privately owned tow trucks when providing emergency service to non-commercial vehicles and vehicles with a gross vehicle weight of less than 26,000 pounds. Board Bill 72, sponsored by Alderman Ortman, an ordinance establishing a three-way stop sign at the intersection of Sidney and Lemp by regulating all east through west traffic traveling on Sidney Street approaching such intersection and containing an emergency clause. Board Bill 73, sponsored by Alderwoman Howard, an ordinance establishing a two-way stop sign at the intersection of Eichelberger and Alfred by regulating all east-west traffic traveling on Eichelberger approaching such intersection and containing an emergency clause. Board Bill 74, sponsored by Alderwoman Howard, an ordinance establishing a three-way stop sign at the intersection of Walsh and Newport by regulating all east-west traffic traveling on Walsh approaching such intersection and containing an emergency clause. Board Bill 76, committee substitute, sponsored by Alderman Bosley, and ordinance recommended by the Board of Public Service establishing a public works and improvement project for the design and construction of various preventive maintenance procedures on 8 off-system bridges, including Gravois Underpass, Chippewa Underpass, Laurel and Waterman over Metrolink, Morgan Ford over Union Pacific Railroad, Alabama over River des Peres, Knox over River des Peres, Sulphur over River des Peres, and Sublet over River des Peres, and containing a public work emergency clause. Board Bill 79, sponsored by Alderman Bosley, and ordinance recommended by the Parking Commission making appropriation for payment of the operating expenses, capital equipment, and improvement expenses, including lease purchase agreements and involving the Parking Division assets, debt service expenses of the Parking Division of the Treasurer's Office, Keels and City Hall parking facilities, Argyle parking facilities, Shoto Building and parking facilities, William Paper parking facilities, Central Downtown parking facilities, Buckingham parking facilities, Couple parking facilities, and the Justice Center parking facilities for a fiscal year beginning July the 1st, 2013 and ending June the 30th, 2014, amounting in an aggregate sum of $14,447,715 and containing an emergency clause. Board Bill 80, sponsored by Alderman Rhodey, and ordinance recommended by the Board of Public Service to vacate travel on Carnes Place from Clayton to East-West Alley in City Block 4591 West, from Carnes Place, bounded by Oakland, Berthold, Hampton, Clayton, and Oakland. Board Bill 81, sponsored by Alderman Rhodey, and ordinance recommended by the Board of Public Service to vacate travel on the North-South Alley in City Block 3954, bounded by Clayton, Vanderventer, Sarpy, and Sarah. Board Bill 82, sponsored by Alderwoman Davis, and ordinance recommended by the Board of Public Service to conditionally vacate travel on the East-West Alley in City Block 1039, bounded by Samuel Shepherd Drive, Compton, Washington, and Leonard. That's the extent of perfection consent.
Alderman from the 8th, you're now recognized.
I would move, object to Board Bill 89 being on the perfection consent calendar.
Which board bill, could you state it? Which board bill was
89.
Madam Clerk, please move board bill, I think he said, pretty sure he said 89, to the regular perfection calendar.
So noted.
Alderman from the 24th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request we move Board Bill 2, Committee Substitute, to the perfection calendar.
Madam Clerk, please move Board Bill 2, Committee Substitute, to the regular perfection calendar.
Thank you.
So noted.
Alderman from the 18th.
Yes, Mr. President, I would like Board Bill 1, Committee Substitute, also moved off of the consent calendar.
Madam Clerk, please remove Board Bill 1, Committee Substitute, place that on the regular perfection calendar.
So noted.
Any further requests? Any further requests? Alderman from the 13th, you recognize on the motion for the perfection consent calendar as amended.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for a perfection of the aforementioned bills on the consent calendar as amended.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 13th, seconded by the Alderman from the 11th. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Board bills for perfection.
Board Bill 89, sponsored by President Reed and Alderwoman Behringer, an ordinance reaffirming the provision of ordinances 62391, 66691, 67617, 68409, and 68934, establishing a policy for the disclosure of potential conflicts of interest and substantial interest for certain municipal officials and containing an emergency clause.
Alderman from the 16th, you recognize on the perfection of Board Bill number 89.
I move to perfect Board Bill 89.
Moved by the Alderman from the 16th, seconded by the Alderman from the 20th. Alderman from the 16th, please proceed.
Board Bill 89 is a rudimentary bill regarding financial disclosure that has been passed every other year since 1999 here at the Board of Aldermen.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion? Alderman from the 8th.
Morning, Mr. President, members of the board. And prior to 1999, Alderwoman, I don't remember if you were here back then. I know the years are getting by me a little bit, but actually it went down to every alderman. We used to file the financial disclosure reports and what we owned and who we worked for and all of those different things. And what I'm asking is that maybe more city employees or elected officials should go back to that to bring back some of the transparency that people expect from government. You know, we constantly get called out in the press over different things that some of us may or may not do with respect to disclosure, but not only that, your potential opponents or opponents for citywide office, you know, right now don't disclose all of their financial interests that may or may impact their ability to serve the city of St. Louis. Right now, this bill only calls for the mayor and the supply commissioner to comply with the personal financial disclosure portion of it. The president of the Board of Aldermen, the comptroller, and potentially other citywide elected officials have significant impact into the contracts and the contract letting processes here. In most cases, the president and the comptroller has an appointee on all of the selection committees that select people that get the professional services contracts, the selection committees for large construction projects, selection, you know, special committees to select various groups that will render services to the city of St. Louis. I would prefer that this actually include all elected officials, including aldermen, but that would be my next amendment. But amendment number 1, and I realize that it's a lot of paperwork, so I'm not doing all of the aldermen. I know that it's a lot of paperwork for all of you. So what I'm offering today, and it's on each of your desks, is amendment number 1. And what I would be doing is, what amendment number 1 does, is add on page 3, on line 1, after the words mayor and before the words and the supply commissioner, insert the words the president of the Board of Aldermen, the comptroller, and all citywide elected officials. And I would request a roll call vote.
It's been moved by the Alderman from...
I move that we adopt amendment number 1.
Moved by the Alderman from the 8th, seconded by the Alderman from the 13th. Any further discussion on amendment? Alderman from the 20th.
Will the Alderman from the 8th yield?
Alderman from the 8th, will you yield for question to the Alderman from the 24th?
Absolutely.
Morning, Alderman. There's a section in this bill that doesn't just deal with financial disclosure, it also deals with conflict of interest. There's a couple things we could do with this bill, right?
Yeah, I'm listening.
Right. Why are we just focusing on this financial disclosure issue? Why, all of a sudden, it didn't come up in committee that we should add additional office holders or candidates into this. Why now?
Well, before 1999, each of us aldermen did it, and everybody did it. And then I think the ordinance that we did in 1999, because it eliminated it. The conflict of interest is one thing, but that's from your perspective as an individual. The most important thing is transparency. I used to put down every person that I worked for, every investment I had over whatever those dollar amounts were. And I was happy to do that just as a lowly little alderman. I don't sit on that committee, and I know in the recent election, you know, there was a dispute as to this, but if you look at the comptroller, the president, the other citywide elected officials, the public has the right to know what investments, employers, that they're involved with and how it may or may not impact their performance or their review. And this is one of the things that will put it in the limelight. Also, if we did it, also included the aldermen, you would have the opportunity, except the way this thing is written on the time frames, it's a little off. We'd have the opportunity, anybody that runs for those offices, you know, to make sure on an ongoing future basis, transparency, what conflicts, potential conflicts do people have? But no, I don't sit on that committee. I know that I'm the co-sponsor on one of your bills coming up on campaign limitations, contribution limitations. The more the public knows, the better they'll be served.
You know, in some ways, I agree with that, but I think that this is such a narrow thing. If we're going to do something with conflict of interest, financial disclosure, we should really think about, you know, I think we should sit down and say, what should we do? Where's the consensus on which direction we take with this? Because passing it this way still leaves this huge hole for the conflicts of family members. And so last question, the Alderman from the 8th. Do we have this form in the room? It seems to me we're voting on something that, the financial disclosure form, seems to me we're voting on something that many of us have never seen before. So is that available for anybody in the room to look at?
Well, I used to fill them out, but what I have, and I'm more than happy to let you amend this to include all of the aldermen and all of the other officials, and I have a stack here for you. And I filled them out prior to 1999. I was comfortable with them, and you know, my life is. Excuse me for 1 second, guys. You know, my life is it complicated? Yes. My investments, I don't have a lot, but I used to disclose that I worked for my dad's plastic company, disclose which companies I own personally, who employed me, and I was very comfortable with that. You know, it's a little bit like confession, I guess, but I was comfortable with it. It's not that particularly onerous to fill out that particular form. And the more transparency that we have with elected officials, especially the ones that are selecting people who are on the selection committees, the various committees, to pick people who are going to professional services to the city. It's just nice to know as much as we can. This is better, you know, something is better than nothing, but just one person in the city to disclose, or two, that isn't good enough. I mean, it's not good enough for me. And like I said, you have the option that you can include everybody else.
It sounds like the answer is that form is not in the room, so we can't look at it. The Alderman from the 25th yielded questions.
Alderman from the 25th, will you yield the questions to the Alderman from the 24th?
Yes, Mr. President, I'll yield for questions.
Alderman from the 24th, please proceed.
Alderman, describe the typical economic situation of a resident of your ward, just in averages.
Well, I would say that a good majority of my ward is of median or low income, and I would, based on the data that's available, I'd say about 28% of them are actually below the poverty line.
Right. Do you think there might be an issue where people who have very limited financial resources might hesitate to fill out this form because then everybody can, sort of see the financial situation they're in, and
I think it's a possibility.
That might prevent them from seeking office?
I do think it's a possibility, sure.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion? Alderman from the 8th, you're recognized again.
Will the Alderwoman from the 16th yield to inquiry?
Alderman from 16th, will you yield for question to the Alderman from the 8th?
Yes.
Alderman from the 8th, please proceed.
Alderwoman, if you would agree to put it on the informal calendar, I'll give the alderman, I'm not sure what ward number Scott's in, or alderman, 24. I'll give the alderman from the 24th a little opportunity to think about and get the farm. So if you're amenable to that, I'm more than happy to withdraw my amendment.
All right. Madam Clerk, please place Board Bill number 89 on the perfection informal calendar.
So noted.
I request that Board Bill 89 be put on the informal calendar.
Yes, we've done it. Yeah.
So noted. Board Bill 2, Committee Substitute, sponsored by Alderwoman Young, an ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 901 through 23 Locust Street, 416 North 9th Street, and 421 North 8th Street, and containing a severability clause.
Alderman from the 7th, you're recognized on the perfection of Board Bill number 2.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I move for perfection of Board Bill 2.
Moved by the
Committee substitute.
Moved by the Alderman from the 7th, seconded by the Alderman from the 9th. Alderman from the 7th, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. This is a board bill that is basically approving the redevelopment of 901 through 23 Locust, 416 North 9th, 421 North 8th. Basically, these are the buildings formerly owned by the Roberts brothers, and it will allow the new owner to make improvements on these properties.
Anything further, Alderman? Alderman from the 24th? Are you?
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the Alderman from the 7th yield the questions?
Alderman from the 7th, will you yield the question to the Alderman from the 24th?
Sure.
Alderman from the 24th, please proceed.
I bring this up because I had a bunch of emails on this bill. The redevelopment bill encompasses several buildings, correct?
I'm sorry?
The redevelopment bill encompasses several buildings.
Yes,
correct?
it does.
The plan specifies demolition of some of those buildings?
It does not specify demolition. It has the possibility that, it recognizes the possibility that 2 of the buildings may need to come down because of their condition, and it sets parameters for that. If there should be a need for demolition in the future, the developer has to meet some certain qualifications and certain guidelines in what goes back on the lots when those buildings would be demolished, or if they should be demolished. However, it does not give an automatic blank check to go knock them down.
Usually we've always got 2 things in play. We've got the Cultural Resources Office and Preservation Review, and we've got these redevelopment ordinances. And typically, these redevelopment ordinances sort of trump the preservation ordinance. So is this a case where if the owner of the property went to apply for a demolition permit, that permit would not be reviewed by Cultural Resources?
The reason for the committee substitute is because there have been a number of conversations between Cultural Resources and the Planning Commission about what would go in the place of this. So the section that was revised there defines what needs to happen. It doesn't go into who would need to review it, but I'm sure that when they come in for a demolition permit, it would be sent to Cultural Resources, because they would have to show what they're planning to put in the place of any building there that would be demolished.
Okay. I worry, the mayor once tweeted something to the effect that tear a building down, for parking, central business district? I don't think so. Something to that effect. I worry that, and I think that's an impulse that I think many of our constituents probably share. I worry that we're not quite getting there on this one, to that that level of review. On the other hand, I don't have all the information on this, but it's certainly been a concern expressed to me many times by constituents or by residents around the city. So that's why I bring this up to ask. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the perfection of Board Bill number 2? Any further discussion? Alderman from the 2nd? Did it again. Alderman from the 7th? You recognize the close on the perfection of Board Bill number 2.
If you move me out of the 7th, I won't be arguing this bill.
I'm moving you all over the city today.
Well, I understand the concern about demolition of buildings. And downtown certainly has had its share, but we've also had lots of successes. And unless we start recognizing that the financial climate is really important also to redevelopment, and we recognize that these buildings have been sitting there an extremely long time, and we recognize that the cost of buildings and renovation don't get any cheaper. I'm looking at the Couple Station building and heard that one fellow said he could do it for $40 million, while I'm looking at the arcade building, which is a totally different condition, and the developers there are saying they're going to need $105 million, and we're struggling to figure out how to do that. The decisions that we have are not easy decisions. I think that this has been a plan that has been looked at very carefully by Cultural Resources and by the Planning Commission. They have struggled with the developer on what to do here, and they are trying to define terms which would protect the city's interest in terms of our streetscape, as well as adhere to the historic qualities that we want in the streetscape that we want to maintain in our downtown. So, while there is a potential here for demolition, it is not a blank check, and I would urge your favorable review.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 7th, seconded by the Alderman from the 9th, that we perfect Board Bill number 2. Alderman from the 24th.
I just asked for a roll call vote.
Been a request for roll call. Madam Clerk, call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Flowers. Alderman Bosley. Alderman Moore. I didn't hear you.
He said aye. He said aye. Yeah.
Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderwoman Ingracia. Alderwoman Young. Alderman Conway. Alderman Ortman. Alderman Vollmer. Alderman Villa. Alderman Arnowitz. Alderman Wessels. Alderwoman Howard. Alderwoman Florida. Alderwoman Behringer. Alderman Rhodey. Alderman Kennedy. Alderwoman Davis. Alderman Schmidt. Alderman French. Alderman Boyd.
Aye.
Alderman Vaccaro. Alderman Ogilvy. Alderman Cone.
Aye.
Alderman Williamson. Alderman Carter. Alderwoman Cruzen.
She said
President Reed.
aye.
Alderwoman Tyus.
I got you. Okay.
Alderman Bosley. Alderman Arnowitz. Alderwoman Florida. Alderman French. 25 aye votes, 2 present.
By a vote, you sustain the motion of the Alderwoman from the 7th and perfected Board Bill number 2. Committee substitute.
2 committee substitutes. Board Bill 1, committee substitute, sponsored by President Reed and Alderman Kennedy, budget for fiscal year 2013-2014, containing an emergency clause.
Alderman from the 18th, you recognize on the perfection of Board Bill number 1, committee substitute.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I move for perfection of Board Bill number 1, committee substitute.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 18th, seconded by the Alderman from the 19th. Alderman from the 18th, please proceed.
Yes, Mr. President, members of the board. Board Bill number 1 is, as it is traditionally, the annual city's appropriation for the budget. This time is for budget year 2014. On everyone's desk should be a copy of the summary that the Budget Division created related to the budget, overviewing the budget, as well as a second document that outlines some of the major points raised at the public hearings that we had related to the budget. There are no major changes in the budget for 2014 in relationship to 2013. It's pretty much the same budget. The Budget Division was anticipating or is anticipating a 1.8 increase in the overall budget, including the revenues for 2014. When the budget director made his request from the various departments to send to the budget division their various needs, all those needs exceeded the estimated income for 2014 by some $35 million. The budget director pushed the various departments to streamline that, and they got it down to about $16 million. Difference between what they expected to generate and the expenses. After that, the budget director, with the various departments, outlined 3 other things that they should do to bring that $16 million down. And that's on page 5 of the summary, where he outlines the 3 different ways that the departments looked at cutting and cut their various budgets to bring that down to a balanced budget. The committee looked at the budget, brought in the various departments. There was not a lot of wiggle room in there. We didn't find a whole lot of fat that was in the budget that we could find, as I said. There were several items that were noteworthy. On the next page, after page 5, in that summary, it does outline in details the various other ways that the various departments would cut this budget to bring it down to make it a balanced budget. The budget for 2014 is roughly, let me see here now, it's $984,600,000. That's about 1.8 higher than what it is for 2013, with the increase in revenue that they're expecting from, I believe, from the earnings tax and several other taxes for 2014. The committee did something different this year in that it held 2 public hearings related to the budget. The first hearing of the public hearings allowed for the public to understand and review the budget. This was different than in previous years. At that particular meeting, we distributed a number of documents to help people understand the budget process. And then the budget director, Paul Payne, actually went through a PowerPoint program with those who were in attendance on the details of the budget. We were very pleasingly surprised. We had an almost capacity crowd on that first day and an over-capacity crowd on the second day. After completing the discussion about the budget on that first day, individuals could ask questions. Paul Payne, in our opinion, answered them very amply. And the next day, then, we allowed for public comment and ideas about how people think the money should be spent and what should be the priorities of the city. That is the second document that should be on your desk that outlines, that is the summary of the major points. There are a few I'd like to raise. Residents pointed out something that I was really unfamiliar with, and that was the velodrome that was in Penrose Park. That is in great disrepair. That is a bicycle track that is in Penrose Park, and the only one that the city owns. And they pointed out that that needs to be repaired. There was a number of individuals there, and the thing about on the second day when we held the public hearing, it was good to see the number of young people who were there, interested in the city process, the budget process, and with clear ideas. They pushed this notion and brought up this idea of what is called participatory budgeting, and shared with the committee some written documents about it. We will also be sharing that with the full Board of Aldermen. There's a brief description of what that is in this document. Also pointed out by people in the hearing is that they, one, appreciated having the opportunity to be able to comment. They just would have liked to have had a little bit more time to really digest the information and come back with ideas. Perhaps next year, if we do that, we can give them several days in between. Many of our members of the committee also commented about how tight this process is. You know, E&A gets this budget over to the Board of Aldermen the 1st of May, and by the end of June, we have to do all this whole review process and get this thing passed. That's rather tight. So we've also talked about ways that we can get involved in this process a little bit earlier so that the public can also be involved in it a little bit earlier. So the other major points are in this document that has been passed out. There is a feeling, particularly in North St. Louis, of being somewhat disenfranchised, and so it was also raised at the hearing about having some priority in doing development in North St. Louis and perhaps having some portion of the general city budget to be earmarked for development in areas that are distressed in the city. It's not just North St. Louis, but it is certain areas that are distressed. One other major thing raised was people's concerns about crime prevention and crime prevention programming. With that in mind, the committee did recommend the restoration of an additional $135,000 back into the crime prevention fund. Since it was raised at the hearing, the committee wanted to respond to people. And so then there was a recommendation by the committee to E&A to place back into the crime prevention dollars at least another $135,000. It was cut almost in half, just about $500,000, so that would take it up to around $635,000 for crime prevention programs. E&A did agree with the committee and did restore those dollars to that fund. That is just one of the ways that the committee also responded to the requests of the public at the public hearing. Also different this year is that the committee streamed the meetings. I'm not a techno geek on all of this, but we did stream the meeting. In other words, you could see the meetings online as they were happening. That was in response to people's requests that this process continue to be open and that it continue to be transparent and that people have the opportunity to have some interaction with it. The two public meetings were held in the evening so people could come out. We believe they were very successful. And so the committee, in trying to extend that transparency, streamed through the city TV station the various meetings that we continue to have throughout this whole budgetary process. For the most part, Mr. President, that reviews the committee. I would like to thank the committee. They were very progressive and diverse group and entertained and were very enthusiastic about this idea of having public hearings in this way, allowing the public to testify at the hearings.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also would like to just commend that committee. I don't know how many of you had an opportunity to attend those evening meetings, but it was just really, really refreshing to see the residents come out and not have to rush back to work or anything. They had time to be there. They brought I think they brought some good things to the table in terms of discussion and points. And I have to commend you and the rest of that committee for a job well done. I think that you guys did a tremendous job, and I think you gave a lot back to the people in getting them engaged in the process, along with leveraging some newer technologies. You guys had people tweeting during the meeting the things that were happening. You had people on Facebook, you had people streaming live, all of those things. You leveraged all of it. So the committee, I want to give you guys a round of applause for a job well done in terms of just making sure that it was an open process. Let's give them a round of applause real quick. Alderman from 24th.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. I wanted to echo some of the comments you just made. Thank the chairman of the committee. I think that I hear all the time from residents, there's a tremendous interest in having more information available. There are so many times when if people can just see what the money is being spent on, sometimes they understand why we can't do some things that people would like, and they understand how expensive some things are that they might like. And this budget, we made some great steps this year. There is still a real opportunity, I think, to involve regular folks earlier in the process, because by the time we see that budget, it is very much almost a completed document. And there's also a big opportunity to make the document itself more transparent. I can tell you that it is not particularly accessible even to us. And it is really in 2013, next year 2014, it's really kind of a failure, technology failure, to not have that information be easier to access, and to not, we sort of expect, oh, you're interested, you're a regular resident interested in the budget. Here's 1,500 pages of PDF to comb through. It tells people don't even bother, basically. So, thank you for the things that were added to the process this year, and hat tip to next year. I think there's still much more we can do to get more input. So, thanks.
All right, thanks. Any further comments? Alderwoman from the first.
I think the 19th
Both
was
of
up
you guys
before me.
popped up. Both of you popped up at the same time. Alderwoman from the 19th.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. President, members of the board, I too rise to congratulate the alderperson from the 18th Ward for his management of the Ways and Means budget process. It is difficult and cumbersome. It always will be. Nothing is going to change. Anytime you're dealing with a general fund and a capital fund that almost totals $1 billion, it is not going to be easy, and there's no way to make it simplistic. It is impossible. I do know and understand that because I've been on 5 boards and managed $1 billion plus budgets. So I do understand that part of it. I also understand that if your representation is thorough and honest, that most people are not looking for minute details. They're looking for your leadership, and your leadership should always be strong and be communicative always on everything you do. There are not many people in my ward that can't tell you what goes on here, that does not understand the budget process, does not know the things that I plan to do and support as I move forward. I always share with them, if somebody told you that I said this, yes, it is true, because that's what I plan to say. So educating your public is a part of our responsibility as alderpersons and legislators. It is not the responsibility of the bureaucratic function of this city of St. Louis to do that necessarily. And as we look at this and moving forward, we as a body, again, I go back to when I first came here and said, we do not have a complete planning operative process that is transparent and is not combined with all committees so that it moves forward with the understanding. So if we decide to do that at some point, it will be even more transparent and easier for people to understand. But you did your ultimate best. You brought the opportunity to the public, and I say thank you.
Alderwoman from the first.
Mr. President, members of the board, I would like to thank the alderman from the 18th for his leadership. I do think that the open meetings were wonderful. I guess I think about Ways and Means as 2 different timelines, pre-Geraldine Osborne and post-Geraldine Osborne. For those of you who were around, there used to be a time when the Board of Aldermen had a lot more power over the budget process, okay? And that was because besides being able to take things out, we actually used to be able to put things in and change things. And the alderwoman from the 15th was such a strong force that the mayor's office at that time, which was Shamel, got the charter changed because she handled the board's business in making sure that that budget process. I think the alderman from the 24th would have loved being here when she was here, because he would have known every little detail about that budget. But that's not the process that we're operating under now, and so our hands are tied. I generally don't vote for budgets because I don't think that they're fair to my community. I know that the aldermen from the 18th did a really good job, but I do think some minutia things are important. One of the things is when I look at forestry and I look at the problems that we have in our community, and I'm hearing a screaming in my community now about property that the city owns that's not properly being taken care of. So I'm looking for forestry to have more of a budget to cut grass and things, not reduce it down or just kind of ride it out. I'm looking at how we tell citizens that you can't have your grass but 6 inches, and then we let city properties come up to the knees, and we cut every month or maybe more than that. Those are the kind of things I found out that are sometimes more important than what you think to citizens. I had a citizen call me one time, and I was talking about this $6 million school I had got built, which is Lexington School. And she said to me, but I'm talking to you about dumpsters. That's what's important to me. And that was a very good lesson to me about sometimes what we think is the minutia is what's important to the citizens, okay? And so sometimes when I look and I drive through the city and I see the parks being cut, much better than the places that are next to people's homes. And the people are cutting their grass, keeping their property up, and then I see the things that the city owns, and not all of them are the city-owned properties. And I always caution people and tell them that just because you see a board that we boarded it up, it doesn't mean it's ours. It could be a private property, but we haven't addressed that issue. And we're losing working and middle-class people in this city because sometimes it's the very minutia that we think, oh, we got to do this development, but we're not doing things like cutting grass, plain and simple. You always have to have a foundation for a house, a strong foundation to have a good roof. And so what I see in this city a lot of times is people just blow that off, that's not my problem, until it becomes their problem. Many problems that happen in North St. Louis, I can remember over the years, people in other parts of the city saying, we don't have that. Well, now when I travel those parts of the city, they have it and then some, okay? There is no part of cancer that stays mostly in one part of your body, okay? The same thing with the city. When you have a cancer in the city and you think that's okay for it to be the cancer over there, but not here, it's going to creep into your neighborhood. I've always represented a certain area, it's where I live, and we always had the privilege of kind of being working middle class, even some upper class people living there. And around me, it was a lot of neighborhoods with a little more poor than we were. And people would say to me, why do you raise so much heck? You got a pretty good looking ward. And I did until it was torn up 10 years ago. But I always knew that me having a good ward was not good enough if the ward next door was not the same and the ward next door was not the same. And so you really got to look at this holistic thing. Whenever I hear what we can't do in the city, it is because we've prioritized something else, okay? And it is, I'm not cutting your grass because I think downtown is more important. But for me, the neighborhoods are more important. So when I tell you I appreciate what you did, but I don't think that we put the priority on the right things. And I know that we don't have the power that we ought to. And I know that ultimately, if we voted this budget down, the way it's now set up, the budget that's submitted is what goes into law. So I understand all of that. But for me personally, I want to be on record as saying, I hear you constituents when you say you want your grass cut, that you want your dumpsters emptied properly, that you want the city to take care of its LRA property by cutting the grass correctly, that you want them to board up buildings correctly, that you want their neighborhoods that they live in, that they put their last dimes and pennies in, and especially the people that I represent, a lot of them live in houses that before there was integration, they bought these houses, they paid for them, they've worked, they've been teachers, doctors, lawyers, they don't want to move. Everybody thinks that, why do you live there? Because people like their neighborhoods and they want to live there and they're proud of it. But I feel, since I've been back here these 8 weeks, I've felt such a frustration from the people about something as what people would think is minutia as cutting grass. The Kings Highway Boulevard, which is a memorial boulevard to World War I veterans. I want to thank Dan Skillman because when I got back here, I talked to him about the flagpole that's right at Martin Luther King and Kings Highway. We got that painted, but that used to be a memorial in which we had plaques for all the soldiers up and down Kings Highway at the trees and things like that. We don't have that anymore, and we're working on getting that back. But when they cut Kings Highway a couple of weeks ago, the grass is still laying all around the median. Looks like hay that it's been there so long, okay? Those are the kind of things that people may not think it's very important, but I bet you most of my colleagues who have vacant properties can tell you that's what they hear about more than they hear about these big deals that happen downtown. So I want to thank you, Alderman, from the 18th, but I do think our priorities, which are set from Room 200, are incorrect, and it's maybe because you don't live in that community that you don't understand there's something much more important. And I want to say to the Alderman from the 24th, it's refreshing to hear people question. Okay, I was in your position many years ago. When you question things, people want you to be quiet and they don't want to hear it, and oh, why is he asking that? That's how you learn things, and so keep doing that. I support you. Anytime I can, I'm going to support you asking questions, because we hurry through things many times, and maybe I know it or somebody else may know it, but you don't know it, and you represent a community that you have to go back to. And I guess I disagree with my colleague from the 19th. Yes, the aldermen are somewhat responsible for telling your community, but at the end of the day, we all represent a holistic world. And so from young people like yourself, we get new ideas. Sometimes older people, I'm 57, you get set in, oh, well, that's the way it's always been. That doesn't mean it always has to be. That's why we have young people that come and teach us things, that say, look, you've been doing this wrong for so many years. It's time for you to do it a different way. So I hear you. I will read a cumbersome document, but I hear you when you say that is not fair to the average citizen, and it will turn them off. When I was practicing law, when people would do a request for documents, we would sometimes give them way too much to encourage them not to go through things. So that's our way of not giving people anything, is to give them too much information. So you are correct in your assertion, and we need to hear you, Alderman from the 25th, Alderwoman from the 6th. Young people are here on this board, and we need to hear that, because we're not always going to be sitting here, and we are leading for the young people, and we need to work with them. We don't have to change everything, but some good ideas that they bring, we need to hear that. And so I want to thank you again, Alderman from the 18th. I will be voting no, but it's not because of what you're doing. It is my principle about our priorities.
All right, thanks. Thanks, Alderwoman from the 1st. Alderwoman from 1st, that was very well put. Alderman from the 8th.
Morning, Mr. President, members of the board. Alderman Kennedy. That was a pretty easy job. You got that through pretty smoothly. No, I feel your pain, and so I appreciate it. You know, the one thing about opening up the technology, and you put the aldermen on TV and they talk, you know, and so that's one point I want to address is the particular animus by the alderman from the 21st Ward regarding Tower Grove Park, and so that the residents in the city that live around that park and my colleagues here understand that arrangement with the park. But those residents, if you live around the park, the alderman from the 21st believes that park should be cut from that budget. That park was given to the city by Henry Shaw, but to be run by a separate board that's appointed by the Missouri Supreme Court, and it's always been that way. As a child, I grew up, that park was in hideous condition as I grew up. But about 23 years ago, they did get a new park director, and that guy's name was John Carroll. And he was able to bring on board the residents that live in those neighborhoods to say, this isn't good enough for us. And they created a Friends of Tower Grove Park, and I know that Francis Park has started the same thing, is to involve the community in cleaning up the park, contributing privately to the park. And that's premised on, you know, the city doing its portion, and that was the maintenance money for the park, the grass cutting, the tree trimming. Tower Grove Park receives less per acre for that portion of it than any other park. The alderman from the 21st said, well, the park's double dipping because that number is specifically identified in the budget. Now, this is the second or third year that the alderman from the 21st has gone to that to try to divide this community. He represents an area that has O'Fallon Park. All of the proportionate monies that Tower Grove Park receives are the exact same as O'Fallon Park, whether it's the Proposition P, the sales tax, the large park money. And what truly is unusual was he was committed, and you can go online and see this, to say that Tower Grove Park double dips, because he can't fathom the correct presentation. And that is that the city doesn't pay for the maintenance. The park does it itself. The residents of the 4 or 5 wards that surround Tower Grove Park want it to be better. And John Carroll has been very good in getting people to give private money to restore some of those things that you see, the band pavilion, the gates, the deer. He convinces people to give money to that park. All of the efforts, the labor, the money, that those of us that live around that park could go away if the city doesn't carry its obligation to the same extent that it carries to the other city parks. If you live near Tower Grove Park, at risk. The alderman from the 21st was appointed by the president to be on that committee. We knew that his animus in past years was that way. When I was the chairman of whatever Ways and Means, it seems so long ago, but so fresh in my mind.
These people wanted to speak or what?
The way I viewed it, both for you and for the people that live here in the city of St. Louis, 3 years ago when everybody took a hit, whatever percentage cut the Parks Department took, I said Tower Grove Park had to take the same cut. But there's been no change in the percentages as to the Parks Department. The amount that Tower Grove Park gets for its 200 acres for maintenance from the city is $700,000. They do that part. They raise the money. Those of us, like me, I'm a member, friends at Tower Grove Park, I give them money personally, not alderman money. I give them personal money. John Carroll has the ability to go out. And what I would ask each of you is to do what Alderwoman from the 16th Ward is encourage your community to want their parks to be better. Get them to participate. But just because someone is working harder and expects something better for their community doesn't really give you a reason to disparage them with whatever animus you have towards that particular park, those people that live there. Thank you.
Alderwoman from the 6th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I just wanted to take a minute to say I got here in April and I have been pretty quiet so far. I've tried to educate myself on the inner workings. I've learned something from every single alderman down here. What I do know is that with the opening up of this budget process, which I think was exceptional, it kind of follows on the heels of the city's mandate to us as legislators with the passing of Prop R to reduce the size of the Board of Aldermen, HUD's mandate to have us look at the way that we are funding community money with community development block grant and home funds, as well as a discussion in 3 different wards. I thank my opponent Michelle Whithouse and Zach Chasnoff of Moore for bringing participatory budgeting to my attention. And I think we're at a real crossroads in the city. I think we have the ability to really make some creative, progressive, and positive changes, and I would encourage, for as not cynical as it sounds, as all to work together to become creative problem solvers here in the city. We can make some real changes. All of the constituent complaints are valid, and there are ways that we can work to make that happen. Thank you.
Alderman from the 21st.
Thank you, Madam President. I also want to take this moment to thank the chairman for the process that he led this year with the budget process. It's been much more open than normal. Citizens had a chance to see what the process looks like, what we have to deal with. And by making those meetings available in the evening, we actually saw a lot more participation. So I congratulate the chairman for a great first year, time doing this, and I think it's going to get even better. What I'm most excited about is that what the chairman has expressed is that this is not the end of the process, that the Ways and Means Committee will continue to look at the budget throughout the year, how we spend money, and how we prioritize. I think some of the things that came out during this process, which is a rushed process, we don't have very long to deal with these complicated issues. But one of the things that did come out was great disparity, I think, in how we spend in different communities. That is a subject of great controversy, at least in my neighborhood. We see it in the form of course, the parks. The Alderman Conway mentioned the conversation we had about Tower Grove Park versus other parks. It's not anything against Tower Grove Park. I love Tower Grove Park. I go there myself with my family. But what I think is important for us to talk about in this budget process is when some parks in some neighborhoods are given almost 10 times as much as other parks in other neighborhoods. So the approximately $1.2 million out of general revenue that Tower Grove Park gets this year is more than every park in North St. Louis combined. So an O'Fallon Park or a Fairground Park gets around less than $200,000 per year, while Tower Grove gets $1.2 million, and that's just taxpayer money. That does not involve what Alderman Conway discussed, which is a great thing, which is the private money that is also raised for that park. So Tower Grove Park is one of the best parks in the city. It looks beautiful. It is really responsible in many ways for the neighborhoods that are developed around that park. But I think we need to discuss in the budget process that isn't done just accidentally. And it does come after a large investment every year by city taxpayers, much larger than any other park gets. As I mentioned in the committee hearing, I can only imagine what the neighborhoods and the houses around Fairground and O'Fallon Park could look like if the city of St. Louis invested approximately $12 million over a 10-year period. Over a 30-year period, you're talking about over $30 million invested in one park versus less than $3 invested in another park. That makes a huge impact on the quality of life in that park and around those parks. So that is something that we have to look at. It's our responsibility to look at it. And if we're not looking at these disparities, then we're not doing our jobs. But it's not just with park funding. A lot was made about the cut in ward capital improvement funds. Ward capital funds are probably most responsible for the quality of life issues, the appearance of our neighborhoods when you drive through different communities, the conditions of our streets, our alleys. Those funds were cut across the board, but they're not allocated, I think, in a very proportional way. They are awarded by ward, evenly split 28 ways, even though our wards are not evenly split between the geography of the city. So you have some wards that have a much larger percentage of the city streets to deal with, but get the same amount as more dense wards that don't have as many streets to deal with. So that's a disproportionate allocation of funds that happens every year, something we need to look at. And then, of course, the whole budget process is about priorities. And every year we discuss this, and I raise it every year, is that the citizens of the city of St. Louis, the voters, approved an extra sales tax a few years ago to go specifically to help improve public safety in our community, in our city. For some of our neighborhoods, some of our wards, public safety is by far the #1 concern, by far. In fact, public safety is such a concern in some neighborhoods, it is probably the single most distinguishing feature some people know about these neighborhoods is regarding public safety, why they do go or why they don't go, why they do choose to live there, why they choose not to live there. And so when every year we cut that $1 million that is supposed to go towards prevention of youth violence, I think that reflects the wrong priorities. I think that we need to preserve that fund first, frankly, because it's just a drop in the bucket. $1 million in the grand scheme of the budget is a small amount, and if we can't preserve that much to deal with our youth and youth violence and to help fund some initiatives that are dealing with what's going on our streets, I think that's a bad message to send to our community. So I think priorities are something that we should discuss, not just in this budget process, but throughout the year with regard to Ways and Means. Priorities, I think, we've mentioned this before with regard to raising taxes and sales tax regarding parks. We have this peculiar situation now this year where, for instance, in my ward, we have more money allocated to O'Fallon Park than we do the rest of the entire ward. And as we mentioned, as I mentioned on the floor when we voted on this sales tax increase recently for more park funds, is that our parks are well funded at this point. It is the rest of our city, the rest of our neighborhoods that are really suffering. Some of these alleys, some of these streets, some of the conditions, the vacant buildings that really pose a public safety hazard in some of our neighborhoods. We need to have some funds allocated annually and preserve that allocation in the budget to deal with some of those safety issues. So again, I want to thank the chairman for the process, and I'm happy to continue it through the rest of the year.
Alderman from the 20th.
Madam President, members of the board, I appreciate all those who do the heavy lifting on the Ways and Means Committee. It was not my privilege or responsibility this year to do that. I did have the honor of doing that for a couple of years. A few reflections. One is that in the budgeting process, at least for me, I found it difficult when we're trying to make those policy decisions and the prioritization. I know it's difficult when we have such a big budget and line items, but it seems to me sometimes that over the years what's happened is there's the various departmental budgets and there's the various line items, and sometimes you're looking for something and you have to go to this page, to that page, to like 20 different pages to figure it out. It would be helpful in terms of prioritization and policy making if we could simplify some of that. Perhaps that's done with a purpose. In addition to budgeting to make policy, I find it helpful when we figure out ways to save money so that we can prioritize it for other ways. And I raised this a couple of years ago. I've not seen it done yet, so I will raise it again, and that is, I think that our employees are some of the best people in the world to help us figure out how to save money. Our residents as well in many areas when they're looking at the budget. So I think it would be helpful if we had an online means, an in-writing means, a phone means, any means possible for people to recommend and suggest cost savings for the city in terms of its operation, capital improvement, and all of that, where they would get a percentage return for their savings if we in fact implement that. And we might have to put a cap because frankly I think some of our employees would help us save millions of dollars, and I'm not sure that the rest of the city would feel well if they took too much of a percentage of that, so we might have to put a cap. But I think that might be a way for us to save some money. I did want to make sure, and I think perhaps we've mentioned this, but I don't recall it today, and that is, despite the fact that we have a balanced budget, I hope that our constituents don't believe that it has not happened without some pain. So for instance, all of the aldermen here have given up capital improvement monies which the voters voted to go specifically for capital improvement, but cannot go to that because we have so many other needs, and in order to balance the budget, we've done that. Affordable housing, I know we talk about that all the time, and that's an area where we've taken money from that to plug other gaps. The alderman from the 21st mentioned the public safety violence prevention for youth, and we're trying to work on that as well. Also working on things more creatively. We have some monies for demolition, which I think could be better used since it's for public safety, for some buildings for stabilization of those buildings, so that in a weak economy such as this, we could be stabilizing those buildings for the opportunity to then come in and redevelop them later, rather than having areas where we just have either buildings that are barely standing up or buildings that have been lost, and so we've lost the fabric of that community. So again, I appreciate all the heavy lifting that the committee did. I think that there are, as I mentioned, other ways outside of the budgeting process for us to have those monies for prioritization of the needs of our constituents.
Alderman from the 8th.
Again, good morning. I just, for some reason, I thought the alderman from the 21st was an attorney. Today he's a CPA. But again, what he tells you is not the truth. And he can't, it's intellectually dishonest to say Tower Grove Park gets $1.2 million when you're comparing it to the other parks. Again, the city's obligation to Tower Grove Park for this year, I think, is $695,000 or $700,000. The city Parks Department does not cut their grass, aldermen. They don't trim the trees. They don't fill the potholes, but they do that at O'Fallon Park, and they do that at Forest Park. Carondelet Park, all of the other parks, the city does that. That's what that portion is. Every other penny that Tower Grove Park receives is in the same proportion as Carondelet Park or O'Fallon Park, the capital improvements funds, except when Alderwoman Florida and I kick in a lot of our money to make improvements there too. Anything other than that would be, you know, not a fair presentation. He can't get it. He doesn't like it. He has a block to get the truth out. And that's okay, because I have a right to speak too. And I can keep people accountable by speaking the truth. And then what he fails to say is that, like the recreation center in O'Fallon, that gets an extra $1.2 million subsidy that the one down in Carondelet Park doesn't get. What goes here? And he has the ability to give out those, remember we talked about the French passes. You know, I don't get any Conway passes. My point is, look at where the words are coming from, look at the facts, and then you can discount whatever you might want to say. We all have beefs with the budget, where things go. But the people that live around Tower Grove Park care. That's why they donate their personal money. They donate their personal efforts to try to make it a better park. Years ago in the 70s and the early 80s, that was abysmal. It was not safe. You couldn't walk along Grand. The fields were in a horrendous situation. I'd still say the baseball fields are not good at all anyway. Barra Park's field's way better for baseball. They're not that much better over time. But at least the main things, John Carroll, for the Stuff Center, they raised the money privately to build that. The gates at Tower Grove, he raised the money. Someone made a private donation. The Palm House, he got, I think the Stubbs again, to donate the money to redo the Palm House. The bands in all of the gazebos you see, he went out and raised the money and convinced people that this was a valuable investment, a valuable thing for the people that live in the neighborhoods around there. And what happens is, when you come up with these divisive things, oh, that's too nice, they must be getting too much money, well, then it divides us. You're the kind of guy that says, I don't like to divide. Well, think of what message you're sending to us today. Thank you.
Alderwoman, for the first you were standing, did you want to speak?
Yes, Madam President, but I believe the Alderman from the 13th hasn't spoken at all. Okay. Madam President, members of the board, this is interesting because I've started to dig out all of the things I had as the 20th Ward alderwoman, and one of the things I dug up, and I didn't know we were going to be having this conversation, was about the capital improvement sales tax appropriation by year from 94 to 2001, when I was here before. I'm finding this conversation between the alderman from the 8th and the 21st kind of humorous, because before he was an alderman, and I tell this little story, and I joke him about it all the time, the alderman from the 21st came to my house one time and said, why do you always talk about the divisiveness of the North and South? And you shouldn't be doing that. And he gave me a little talking to about that. And I appreciate that, because now that he's here, he gets to see why I always talked about it. And I don't believe it's because he doesn't want Tower Grove Park to have money. I actually am standing here as a person who lived in the 8th Ward for 8 years when John Coke was my alderman, and the alderman from the 8th was part of the recall petition over and over and over again for John Coke. So I was there doing all of that. But I say all that to say that this whole capital improvement sales tax has always been set up unfairly in the first place. So we set it up based on acreage for the large parks. And we've passed this, not only capital improvement sales tax, but we have several other taxes that go to the large parks. So what happens is, and I have this from, not from what I made up, but from the city of St. Louis, and I am in the process of updating it, so we will not have to talk about what I think, what the alderman from the 21st or the 8th thinks, but just facts. But what happened from 94 to 2001 is that the Central West End Park, which was Forest Park, got $12,976,500,000. South St. Louis, Tower Grove, Carondelet, Wilmore. And every time we pass these things, we do these same parks. They got a total of $5,707,550. And the North Side parks, which were Fairground and O'Fallon, got a total of $2,645,550. And so I remember when Alderman Carter, I'm saying the first Carter, sat there, and we were doing a second appropriation for parks, and we actually almost stopped it because my question was, why are we doing the large parks again? And who said that we just have to do the acreage of the large parks? What about if we only have a couple of large parks in North St. Louis, but we have a lot of other parks that are well used? I have Sherman Park and Penrose Park that are used just like large parks, and people are there all the time. When we talk about the Velodrome needing some attention, that's in Penrose Park. Matthew Dickey has part of the acreage in Penrose Park, okay? So instead of saying we're just going to give the money to the acreage depending on the acreage of the parks, we could have said we're going to give, well, North St. Louis has these other parks, and we're going to add up the acreage so that everybody's getting fair, because that is unfair for Forest Park, which has all these pots of money, to be getting $12 million, and all of North St. Louis parks get $2,645,000 and some change, okay? That's unfair. And when you take that over 10 years and not only one appropriation, but we got 3 different appropriations, I think, that's unfair. Now, I appreciate Tower Grove Park. I've been there for a lot of years. I hung out there when I lived there. I like to see the improvements. When you live in a community, you want to see them. But that doesn't mean you close your eyes and don't talk about the unfairness of this. This appropriation is unfair. And what I'm going to do is get all the appropriations, and we're going to look at how the money is appropriated. And you won't have to believe anybody except for the black and white. It is appropriated unfair just from these prior years. And it hadn't gotten any better because we didn't change the formula, so the formula is the same. So when the alderman from the 21st talks about the unfairness, he's talking about now as a representative instead of a starry-eyed young person. I appreciate it, and I left him out as he and the alderman from the 27th or other young people. Question, demand that you know why things are going on. Don't let anybody make you be quiet. And I am going to pull out all the things that I have, thanks to Dan McGuire, when I was a young alderperson, who told me count to 15 and also be an organized pack rat. I have all this stuff, okay? So we don't have to go about what you think. I will supply it to you, and then we'll update it, and then we'll just present the facts. Nobody has to talk about anything but the facts. Now, I agree with the alderman from the 8th. They do raise money, and that's a great thing. But, and the city doesn't pay for things because it is a special grant. But saying all of that, we still don't get the fair amount of money that should be allotted to North St. Louis. And there is no special formula that we give them to these same parks over and over again. And we keep passing the same thing. And it's made it unfair upon unfair upon unfair. And you are correct in it. And Alderman from the 8th, I would never want to take anything unfairly away from Tower Grove Park. I just want it to be fair for the rest of the parks, and especially in North St. Louis. I want Sherman Park to have what it's supposed to have, and I want Penrose Park to have what it's supposed to have. And if that means that Carondelet or Wilmore or Tower Grove has to, and especially Forest Park, has to give up some things so that there is a fairness, because that is not fair when you're talking about $12 million versus $5 million versus $2 million. That's not fair, because we're talking about servicing a lot of people over there, and you're not assuming that those people just go to Fairground and O'Fallon. So there has to be a better way, and these are the kind of things that I was talking about why I don't vote for the budget, because we put a mindset and we just keep passing and saying, oh well, we're just going to do it based on the acreage. Okay, let's do that with block grant money. Let's do block grant money based on who has the most need. Soon as you say that, they say, no, we're not going to do that, okay? So I used to have a book, and I still have it someplace, about how to lie with statistics. Well, you can manipulate statistics any way you want to so that it is advantageous to you. But the parks money is unfair. You are right on time. I didn't know we were going to have this. I'm going to make copies for everybody, and I'm going to update it, and it will be black and white, and you are correct in your assertion.
Alderman from the 18th is recognized to close on his motion.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. I thought somebody else was standing. I was in shock for a moment. We appreciate the comments. We did, as a committee, recognize that this is, in our opinion, many of our opinions on the committee, are a kind of flawed process and very tight for the Board of Aldermen to be able to really take a very close look at the budget and make the necessary recommendations. That's why we talked about trying to continue some of this dialogue and this review even after the budget has been passed towards the future budget. Otherwise, if you leave it to the present process, it will just always end up with the same kind of thing, where you're down to the wire, you get this budget in May, and you got to get it passed by the end of June, and it doesn't really give you the time to really consider and look at the budget in a way that is really meaningful. The committee was very concerned about the consistent cuts to help balance the budget in the Ward Capital Fund, the Affordable Housing Fund, the demolition funds, the public safety funds, and many of the members said it's going to be consistently difficult for them to vote for a budget that continues to show even deeper cuts in these areas, and wished really to engage E&A in a dialogue on other ways to address budget deficit issues. Now remember, this coming year, for 2014, they're expecting some increase in revenue, but there's still increases also in expenses. So the committee recognizes that more needs to be done and further discussion needs to happen, and it intends on continuing looking at this budget towards really addressing many of the issues that have been raised. Otherwise, we end up in the same spot. And so with that, I would renew my motion for the perfection of committee substitute for Board Bill number 1.
Madam Clerk, will you call the roll?
Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Flowers. Alderman Bosley. Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderwoman Ingracia. Alderwoman Young.
Aye.
Alderman Conway. Alderman Ortman. Alderman Vollmer. Alderman Villa. Alderman Arnowitz. Alderman Wessels. Alderwoman Howard. Alderwoman Florida. Alderwoman Behringer. Alderman Rhodey. Alderman Kennedy. Alderwoman Davis. Alderman Schmid. Alderman French. Alderman Boyd. Alderman Vaccaro. Alderman Ogilvie. Alderman Cone. Alderman Williamson. Alderman Carter. Alderwoman Cruzen. President Reed. Alderman Arnowitz. Alderwoman Florida. President Reed. 25 aye votes, 1 no vote.
By your vote, you have passed Board Bill 1 Committee Substitute?
Perfected.
Perfected. Board Bill 1 Committee Substitute.
That's the extent of board bills for perfection.
Third reading consent calendar.
Board Bill 8 Committee Substitute and Board Bill 63.
Alderman from the 13th is recognized on the third reading consent calendar.
Thank you, Madam President. Members of the board, I move for a third reading and final passage of the aforementioned bills on the third reading consent calendar.
All in favor? It's been moved by the Alderman from the 13th, seconded by the Alderman from the 11th, that the third reading consent calendar be approved. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Oh, I'm sorry, you need a roll call on the third reading, so Madam Clerk, will you call the roll?
Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Flowers. Alderman Bosley. Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderwoman Ingracia. Alderwoman Young.
Aye.
Alderman Conway. Alderman Ortman. Alderman Vollmer. Alderman Villa. Alderman Arnowitz. Alderman Wessels. Alderwoman Howard. Alderwoman Alderwoman Florida. Alderwoman Behringer. Alderman Rhodey. Alderman Kennedy. Alderwoman Davis. Alderman Schmid. Alderman French. Alderman Boyd. Alderman Vaccaro. Alderman Ogilvie. Alderman Cone. Alderman Williamson. Alderman Carter? Aye. Alderwoman Cruzen? President Reed? Alderman Conway? Alderman Honorwitz? Alderwoman Florida? Alderman Cone? Aye. President Reed? 25 aye votes, no votes.
By your vote, you've approved the third reading consent calendar. Third reading, report of engrossment and final passage.
We have none.
Report of the Enrollment Committee.
Board Bill 8, Committee Substitute, and Board Bill 63.
All other business being suspended, the President shall now affix her signature to the aforementioned board bills. We will dispense with line item 20, 21, 22. Miscellaneous and unfinished business.
We have none.
Announcements.
Tuesday, Health Committee meeting, 10 a.m. in the Leisure Room. Wednesday, Public Safety Committee meeting, 9 a.m. in the Leisure Room. Friday, full board meeting, 10 a.m. in the chambers. That's the extent of my announcements.
Alderman from the 13th.
Thank you, Madam President. Members of the board, the meeting we were scheduled to have, the HUD's meeting, is canceled. But in your mailbox, there is a draft of the Community Development Block Grant application that will be sent out shortly. But Joe Claybor and Charles Bryson would like to have your comments. Take a look at it, make any comments you have, and either call or write Charles or Jill Claybor regarding it. I've looked at it. It looks pretty good to me, but please take a look at it because they're going to probably be sending these out around July 1st.
Alderwoman from the 16th.
Thank you, Ms. President, members of the board. I would like to let people know that this Saturday in Francis Park is Grub and Groove. And last year was the first year, and they expected 1,500 people, and they had almost 4,000 people. All money raised at Grub and Groove, which is this Saturday in Francis Park, goes directly back into the park. The St. Louis Hills Neighborhood Association raises an average of $30,000 to $40,000 a year for Francis Park, which is in the 16th Ward. So we appreciate all that's put into Francis Park by the residents of the 16th Ward. Thank you.
Alderman from the 22nd.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I'd like to just make a couple announcements of some celebrity birthdays. On Tuesday, June 25th, Alderwoman Gracia and Alderman Baccaro will be celebrating a birthday.
Alderman from the 26th.
Thank you, Madam President. This Sunday, we will be having the free concert, jazz concert at Alden Prairie Park, which is located on Clemens and Bell. It starts at 6:30, is really supported by the Whitaker Foundation. So welcome to everybody come attend some of the free concerts and beautiful music in the 26th Ward at Alden Prairie Park. Thank you.
And who's the music?
That's right.
Who's playing?
King Omawel. This is a reggae band that'll be there.
All right, thank you.
They're a pretty good band. Then we'll have some other bands the following months in July and August. Okay? Thank you.
Alderwoman from the 19th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I have a few announcements to make. First of all, this is the last few days of Circus Floor this weekend. I hope most people had an opportunity to attend. I wanted to also thank the members of the Baptist Convention that were here in our city for a week of 30,000 people. I'm sure they changed our economy a bit, but I hope they also had a joyful occasion here with their convention. I'd also like to give a congratulations to Chief Dodson, his assistants, and other first responders walking in someone else's shoes. he wore the red pumps well. And I know that he can now appreciate when he sees women with those high heel shoes on. So I could not believe it. He wore them through the whole event. He did good. Also on Wednesday, Sergeant Cheryl Orange was promoted to lieutenant of the St. Louis Police Department, and I wanted to congratulate her on her promotion. She does well in serving our community. And lastly, the first responders who have Rolling for Backstoppers, their events this weekend are this Friday. There will be a gala at the Coliseum on Washington. On Saturday, they'll be Rolling for Backstoppers, a skating event at Skate King on Natural Bridge. And on Sunday morning, they're going to do Rolling of Remembrance and motorcycle motorcade for those who have been lost in service. So I ask you to go online and look at Rolling for Backstoppers. It's on Twitter, Facebook, and participate and support it. Thank you.
Alderwoman from the 14th.
I would like to congratulate Police Officer Brian King on his promotion to sergeant. He is a resident of the 12th Ward. However, his parents are residents of the 14th Ward. And a big shout out to him. Thank you.
Alderman, the 22nd, you're up again.
Yes, thank you for recognizing me again, Madam President, members of the board. But I do have a very important meeting coming up, our 22nd Ward monthly meeting on June 27th at Friendly Temple Church, 5515 Martin Luther King Drive from 6 to 7:30. And we will have two very key people that represent the city of St. Louis to keep us safe. There'll be Circuit Attorney Jennifer Joyce and Police Chief Sam Dotson. So I encourage as many people to come out as possible. If you have issues about what's going on with crime in our neighborhood and why Pookie keeps coming out of jail over and over again, come out and share your concerns and help make this a great city. Thank you.
Alderman from the 13th is recognized unexcused alderman.
Thank you. I move to excuse the alderman from the 12th and the 15th wards due to necessary absence.
Been moved and seconded that we excuse the alderman. All in favor say aye. Opposed? All right. Alderman from the 13th is recognized on the adjournment motion.
Thank you, Madam President. I move to adjourn the meeting until Friday, 10 a.m., June 28th.
It's been moved by the alderman of the 13th, seconded by the alderman from the 11th. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
By your motion, this meeting is adjourned.